Hey everybody, welcome to our virtual reality talk show. My name is Sir Gray, and tonight I'm joined by Sir Aga, and we are the VR Game Nights gathered around a virtual roundtable to discuss all the news and happenings in virtual reality this week, especially our thoughts, our impressions of Oculus's new headsets. I get the Quest. Sir Aga, he has a Rift S, and so we're going to talk about that. But before we get to that, I wanted to talk about Tested. The guys over at Tested do a great reviews on virtual reality stuff, and man, they almost had me buying an Index because they just had this great review. I don't know if you had a time, Sir Aga, to see the review, but it was pretty awesome.
I did not, but we also, just openness and transparency, right? I am just firmly out of the Valve Index game at that price point.
Yeah, and it really made me want to buy it after listening to their review. Two things. They said that the refresh rate makes a difference. And they said they just really went on. It was like a half an hour review. And not really a review, more like first impressions or initial
Mm-hmm.
impressions. But they were just talking about the controllers on and on. And I think Valve really hit the home run with the knuckles or the index controllers. So that's again everything we talk about will be in the show notes. So if you want to see what we're talking about, just click down there in the show notes and you can see it. I think they did a great job. I love what they do. Go ahead.
Now, do you know what kind of machine they were running it on?
I know they have 1080s.
Okay, so part of my question is, and I say this with a lot of CES announcements that just dropped about new silicon that will be at CES, which includes AMD's Ryzen 3 processor built on the 7 nanometer process, as well as their next generation Navi GPUs. Very curious as to how VR performance, and you and I have both discussed where we feel like we have seen or we hit limits with current gen silicon trying to push VR. Just in terms from my impression, just in terms of some of the stability we get, and it's not always necessarily clear whether or not that's just simply software maturity in APIs or if it is just where it might benefit from a little extra horsepower. Um, and so I'm very curious to see as your very high end VR headsets come out, of which obviously the Index is one, whether or not they are sufficiently supported by current silicon or whether they will benefit heavily from next generation silicon, which some of which is already coming out, right? In terms of Intel's Ice Lake processors that just debuted this week in Dell laptops.
Yeah, and I got a good, like we talked about in the weeks past. It's like I want I want double the power to 1080. I really don't care about the RTX. I mean, I want to be able to push twice as many frames so I can turn on, really pump, 90 hertz or 120 hertz to both screens in my VR headset. One of the things the guy said is if they try to run 120 hertz at full resolution, they drop frames on the index,
So,
so, that's
so
with a
another
1080.
so another thing that I'll be curious to monitor again as we talk about new silicon is one of the other announcements of what will be showing up at CES will be NVIDIA bringing the Turing architecture to the Quadro line of chips, concurrently with the fact that they've also been rolling out the new Studio framework for their current gen GPUs and past gen GPUs, so both the GTX and RTX. And there's like 3 different variants of GeForce drivers now. There's basically the game drivers, a set of Studio drivers, I think, which benefit supposedly cinema playback and video editing, and one other framework. And I'm kind of very curious to know I'm interested whether or not one of those frameworks might better suit VR, because those frameworks have to be built around supporting things like 144 megahertz displays, and true cinema representation of video as higher end content creators are editing higher end video.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, like I said, I wanted after watching the review, I wanted to run out and buy one. But $1,000, I just think there's so many other things I could buy, and the one thing that kills me about it is the resolution. It's not a jump. The original Odyssey, had that same resolution. back in 2017. But I thought that was a good lead into my impressions of the Quest. So I spent some time this weekend. We were camping. I tried it out both sitting and then in a very small area inside the camper. Um, I don't know what the dimensions were, maybe 8 by 6. And I started off by playing. I tried some stuff, just a couple of minutes here and there to see if it worked. But I went through Vader Immortal. Now that's it to me. Some people say call it an experience. It felt a lot like your classic single player stories, very linear, but still a lot of fun. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. Reminded me a little bit like Jedi Knight in a way.
Mhm.
Good old Dark Forces 2, a good old game. And I really thought they did good. You could see in some places where the graphics were, not super high res, right? So not pixelated. But I was looking around. Like I said, okay, I can see they're really focusing on like Darth Vader himself, right? And they're focusing on what you're looking at and interacting with at the moment. And if you look off into the distance, a lot of that, detail you would normally see, on a PC today isn't there, right? It's kind of a little bit more, not that you'll notice it, but as some of your games all the time, you look for those things, right? It's like how complex are the walls way out and the characters way away from you? But still, really enjoyed that experience for $10. It's part one of I don't know how many, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think it's a little expensive, but it was well worth the $10. And if you have a Quest and you've been thinking about getting it, I would get it. Now, is it the reason to buy the Quest? No, but it's a lot of fun. And then I played some virtual reality, and I think there may be some bugs in that game. It's a fun game. It's a weird game. But sometimes I just have to close it and reopen it because it's like I would get stuck, like
Okay.
things like it wouldn't progress, and
Right.
I just thought it was weird. But it's the first week, of all the new titles, so I'm sure it still needs some debugging. But it's still a very impressive game, a lot of fun, very
Mhm.
strange. But
Now,
go ahead.
in those games that you played, did you notice whether or not, and it's a very minor thing, it's only a cosmetic or an aesthetic. I've noticed in some games that I've gone into with the Rift S that the virtual representation of the controllers are not the Rift S controllers. They are the OG Rift controllers. Have you noticed some of that where the controller imagery hasn't shifted over and been updated yet?
No, and I think probably because everything that got onto the Quest had to be curated by
Hmm.
Oculus. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons I think it was Alt Space wasn't on launch day was because they weren't hitting the 72 frames per second required, 72 hertz required. Like in every one of their curated experiences, they weren't able to maintain that frame rate, and that's yeah, I could be getting that story wrong, but I believe that's what it was. So they could not launch. They had to go back and do some optimizations. So because everything has to be curated, I had no problems like that. But I can see where on the PC, if I'm a game developer and the OGs are the same as the new ones as far as functionality, they showing you the original ones. I mean, it took a long time for Windows Mixed Reality controllers to get into most of the
Hmm.
games, which was made a lot of them almost unplayable
Yeah,
because you didn't know what
and
the
and
controls were. But
and they still aren't entirely. I just brought up a game like a couple of weeks ago with the Acer AH101 and got like the Vive handsets represented on the screen. So
yeah,
it happens, but it's just like it's an aesthetic, so you could let it go. Um, so I mean, it's a little aggravating when you see it, but it's a thing.
well, I just my overall impressions of the Quest was the display is good. There is screen door. You can see pixels if you search for them. Um, it has a higher resolution than the original Rift, right? But
Hmm.
I don't know that the screen door is less on it. Like I was just playing on the Rift tonight with some friends, and I didn't notice the screen door. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I'm sure it's there. Maybe I'm just it's just the way I'm used to it. But
How
I
was
really
how
liked the
was
display. I thought it was very detailed.
how was battery life and if you I was pulling some things up when you were talking earlier, so I may have missed a drum beat. But how was battery life, and can you talk to me about the Guardian experience through the actual headset?
Okay, so the battery life I thought was pretty good, but it's only 2 to 3 hours.
Okay.
So and it just felt to me once it got low, it went pretty quick. You know what I'm saying? So I once
Yeah,
put
yeah,
it on, it
right.
was at 35, and it only felt like I had like 20 minutes in it before it was like saying low battery, low battery. They give you a really long charging cable. I mean, the charging cable is 10
right.
feet, which is great. As far as I also want to say the sound was awesome, even though it's piped
Mhm.
through. Like I think a lot of people are saying that the Quest sound is a little bit better than the Rift S. It's just
Mhm.
a different piping, but also I just plugged in earbuds. At one point, my wife was taking a nap, so I put in some earbuds. They work great too, you know. But I thought the piped sound in was pretty good. Um, and the tracking was good. That it was exchanges messages with somebody on Reddit. And they're like, "Oh, the tracking's laggy." I'm like, I didn't. I never experienced any laggy tracking. So I mean, it felt solid, solid. Now, if I looked up and my hands were way down, and I looked back down, I get a little pop with the hands like coming into the right place because the cameras, once your hands come back into the
Mhm.
cameras, they're gonna go back into the right place. But um, and what was your other question? So battery life was decent, but again, it's
Okay.
only 2 to 3 hours.
Right. So it's Nintendo Switch like in some ways, maybe a skosh bit less.
Yeah, and it's for me, it's hard to stay in it for 3 hours.
Right. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
trying to find how much time.
When we get to the game that I'm talking about, even not in VR, that game I can only play for like 30 to 45 minutes at a time. And then I wanted to hear you talk about the Guardian experience a little bit.
That's right. So I like the Guardian. I actually have a link. We'll talk about in a little bit about it. But I thought it was very easy to set up. Now, as far as the when you break the Guardian and it shows you what's around you, that's extremely helpful. But it's not it doesn't feel stereographic. You know what I'm saying? I can see everything, but it's almost like I'm cross-eyed. You know what I mean? So, and I don't think that's an issue on the Rift S, but I think that's a known thing with the Quest. It's not 100% stereo. So you kind of feel like you're looking out a little cross-eyed, but it's so helpful to be able to
So do
lean
you
out
have
and grab your controllers, you
right?
know.
So does it present? So does it cause problems with depth perception essentially? I mean, or is it? I mean, is it basically does it, the image it represents is basically enough for you to stop and know whether or not you're in immediate danger, but it's not like you wouldn't want to just like continue walking around
It would be
with that.
hard because it doesn't feel like it's reflective. This it's hard to explain, but it's not a pure. It's not like you're looking through a pair of binoculars.
Okay.
It's distorted. It's distorted. You can still see everything, especially if you look this way or that way. But like with the two images combined, it just feels weird. But it's enough to find a drink. It's enough to find your controllers. It's enough to see when the dog walked up.
Is it enough to see your phone? Because
Yeah. Oh yeah.
that's
Um.
my biggest thing is, and I've been experiencing a lot this week is, and there's we need to have a talk one day with like when do you play VR? And like one of my struggles is if I play VR when there are people in the house and they are awake, I am constantly, or even if it's just the work day, right? Because then I have calls coming in from work. It's I have interruptions. But then if I'm playing at night, then I'm always nervous about like, well, if something goes down, like everybody else is asleep and I can't hear or see a thing. But I would really, I mean, we can talk about it more when we get to it. But what I really need from Guardian and being able to see the actual in visor cameras is I need to be able to actuate that like manually. Like I need to be able to say, hit stop the pause button, let me see the real world. So I can, and this was what I wanted to know if you could see through when your guardian goes off is can you see your phone?
I didn't look at my phone screen. I have a
Right,
6
right.
Plus, a 6S Plus, so it's a fairly good sized screen, but I did not try looking at it. I will try that though. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I hear you. I know Carmack tweeted recently that they're going to do pass through on demand.
Okay. Oh,
That they're
awesome.
looking at doing. They're working on that right now.
Right,
I don't
right,
know
right.
if I don't know if he was just talking about the Quest or the Rift S. You
Okay.
know, so that's. I think it might have been on the Quest. I know Windows Mixed Reality added the pass through on demand, the
Oh, wow.
flashlight.
Okay.
I don't know how to I don't use mine enough, so you can see they're on the shelf here. I don't use
Okay.
them enough to know how to do it, but I did read confirmation that they have that.
Okay.
Um, but I'll keep my eyes out on any news on that on the Rift S. I wanted to get through my Quest impressions. Just I
Sorry.
thought the setup was great. I thought the menu, everything was fine. I think it was, being a Rift user, I felt very at home. Um, thought the sound was great. Thought the tracking was great. Thought the display was good, and I thought the games. I played some Fruit Ninja. I'm really. I think I said this last time. Focusing on cross-buy games that'll work both on my Rift and on the Quest. Because if I'm going to buy it once, if I can get it twice, why not focus on? I got hundreds of games. I think I got 60 VR games on Steam. I haven't played them all. So, if I'm going to buy some games, I want them to be cross-platform if possible. But yeah, so I'm very happy with my purchase. The only thing I'm worried about is getting getting some kind of screen protector, or getting a dedicated Quest bag. The one Oculus makes $40. It looks great, but for $40, there's no like extra space for anything. Like if you wanted to, some people play with a battery so they can extend their play. So they don't. Oculus doesn't officially support playing with a tethered battery, but people are saying it's working and they're not having any issues. But in any case, so that's my impressions of the Quest. Let's hear your impressions of the Rift S.
Well, and actually, before we get to that, I did want to ask you one question. Now that you got through, because you also just mentioned that you're looking to buy things twice. I reckon that the answer is no, but I really want to know if you're willing, and when you do, if you can report back. Have you tried this RiftCat or ALVR, which apparently is an open source set of programs that allow you to stream your PC VR games to your Quest? So then you wouldn't have to worry about necessarily buying everything cross plat. I mean, you still would, because I'm sure this isn't like robustly supported, and it's outside Oculus's realm and Steam's realm of support. But I'm just curious if that has come across your path.
Yeah, I've been really paying attention to this, and Carmack had said that they were before Rift launched. This we're going back several months, well, maybe 3 or 4 months. He had said that they didn't put any PC hardware in the Rift, any hardware to stream to make the. I'm sorry, they didn't put any hardware in the Quest to make it work with a PC. He said it
Right,
was
right,
very, very hotly debated. Um, you know, and I have saw the articles about the Rift Cat and the other one, and everybody's saying they're in beta. It's like clunky, and I'm
right, right.
like, you know what? If somebody said, "Hey, this works great," I would
Yeah,
definitely try it. But I don't have time to be a beta tester. I
sure.
have my CV1, so I'm like I
Right,
played in that tonight. I love it. It works great. I love the original tough touch controllers. I mean that was one of the problems I did have is because I do have the CV1. I kept thinking I had the controllers upside down. So I was like, how do I put these on? Oh yeah,
right, right.
they're but yeah, so I think, honest to goodness, why they just didn't, if they would have charged an extra $100 for the thing and make it be standalone and PC, I would
Right,
have paid
right.
the extra $100. I would have paid an
Yeah,
extra $150. I mean,
right,
one unit that can do standalone and PC.
right, right,
I mean, that's like the holy grail, right? It's like that would have been
right,
awesome, you know.
right.
But and
Yeah,
I'm okay if we all know about the 60, what is it, 60 gigahertz, and how much data you need to do you know stream, two 4K displays, right, in real
right,
time.
right,
And that's coming, but so I wouldn't mind if it was tethered. Absolutely wouldn't mind at all, but
right,
we didn't get that. That's not what we got.
right.
But
So for the Rift S, I have been probably the happiest that I've been with any VR headset to date. With the Vive, again, not having had that much time to use it, I will admit I haven't really. I've only used it with Project Cars. I think my impression now is that Project Cars itself is limited in its VR implementation, and so I need to check the Vive out against some other titles. But just in again comparing how my Acer H101 behaves and performs in comparison to the Rift S, it is things are beautifully crisp and amazingly bright as far as like color saturation just pops. And the audio, I'm happy with the audio. Like, I'm not a big super huge like audio file. Like, my main thing is at my age, like, it just needs to be loud enough. So and the Rift S certainly does that. A lot of times with the Acer headset, I'm fiddling with it a lot to get the volume like where I want it. Like, no such problem with the Rift S. My only thing that I kind of disliked from the initial operational test was that it springs into this goofy demo, and again, it's one of those things where I'm pressed for time. I'm putting on the headset. I just wanted to get it set up and initialized so that I could live stream with it like later that night. And I'm jammed up in between like getting off of work and like my next family time event, and I'm like, and you can't get out of the demo, and I just recent experiences with Destiny 2 and The Division, which are games you can't pause, like those things frustrate me. Like, don't ever take control from it's my PC. So that little design nit bugged me. Now, is it okay if I jump ahead and talk about this topic? I know we have a news
Yeah,
article
please.
about how to fix Rift S issues that you sourced from Upload VR. I read a similar article on VentureBeat, all the same data. There was one additional step on the Upload VR article about cleaning your optics, and I think also so the Rift S, what it has is it has a little light sensor basically right on the bridge of the nose, that when it's occluded, that's when the optics light up. So
Okay.
so you can test it to see if you're getting video by just what I do is I just raise the visor and I just put my finger over that sensor, and if I see the light come on in the visors, then I know I'm getting video. My initial setup experience was not great. I actually thought that I had a defective headset and I was going to have to send it back,
Oh, wow.
because when I initially plugged it in and downloaded the Oculus software package, I was not getting any video. I resolved that issue by hot swapping back and forth between my different display ports that I had on the back of my PC. And eventually I got video. But the first couple times I didn't swap the cable, and I tried like shutting down the software, restarting the PC, uninstalling the software, reinstalling the software, and then finally decided to just swap cables, because everything in the software is indicating that you've got connection with the device.
Hmm.
Is frequently the case. Software says everything is good, but you're looking at the thing and you got no video. Then on top of that, when you launch Steam VR, then Steam VR, you get different readings on it depending on what the Oculus application is saying. So that was unpleasant. Like I said, I thought I was at a point where I was going to have to send the thing back. Turned out, I guess it's fine. I don't know if that's a hardware problem or a software problem. I'm guessing it's software, and something in the integration layer between the Oculus API and Windows. When you look at that article on Upload VR, you get a bunch of indications about like, stop Windows USB power
Yeah.
management, disable Windows's ability to put that specific USB device to sleep. Do the same thing to any ports that are labeled as USB 3.0 or Fresco ports. The Rift S has its own USB hub, and that appears in your device manager. So you need to, keep Windows from putting that thing to sleep. One of the things it talks about is moving the DisplayPort cable. Now, fortunately, most, at least NVIDIA GPUs, have 3 DisplayPort ports on the back. However, and I'm playing it on a PC now where my monitor connections, my one monitor that I have hooked up is HDMI. Now, if if I was using DisplayPort monitors, which I do on other PCs, then I would have 2 of those 3 ports occupied potentially. Typically, when I game, I disconnect one monitor, so maybe I would have an extra port, but it's not, it's a limited set of options. And on that PC, I only have one USB 3.0 port available on the back. So fortunately, I haven't gotten to the point. I've only had to like pull the USB 3.0 cable for the Rift S once and plug it back in. That actually didn't do anything. So it appears that I don't have to hot swap. So I've heard some people have to hot swap the USB 3.0 ports. So that's an issue. It's just a little bit of if you remember back in the early Bluetooth days, and you remember how you used to have to futz and finagle with a Bluetooth headset for like 5 minutes every time you tried to reconnect to your phone. It's kind of like that experience, and that can be, again, when I'm pressed for time and I'm trying to get a live stream kicked off, that can be a little bothersome. It's not a showstopper yet, but it's a it's not optimal. But other than that, the in-game performance is great. The responsiveness is great. The tracking is great. I love the Guardian experience. It was like 30 seconds to configure the thing, and I love its versatility. One of the things that was a little off-putting and constraining in true Gen 1 VR hardware was that establishing that gameplay safe zone, you had to really do it, or fortunately, at least the Windows headsets gave you an option to just basically ignore any kind of safe zone and say, Roger that, you're on your own, right? Was what the software told you. So I'm playing Overload on PC in VR mode. I'm using the Thrustmaster T16000 FCS with the Twix. So I'm just sitting in my chair and I just have the joystick and throttle control right here. I'm like, I only need a Guardian space that like encircles me and the flight control system, right? I don't need like 8 feet of space. And so I literally like spun in my chair with the handset controller and drew like a circle that was like my chair plus 2 feet around me, and I was able to like draw around with one hand and then around with the other hand, and like it works with the convenience that you would want it to. I expected some goofy like voodoo ritual thing that I would have to pull off to get like that small of a Guardian space set. But I didn't. It worked wonderful. It works wonderfully. As soon as I push against the Guardian barrier, I do get that I don't know what I would have called that night vision. It kind of looks like you're looking through night vision goggles. It's just in like kind of a silver or sepia tone instead of green. But that works wonderfully. And then the other thing that works wonderfully, as you told me, you tried to tell me when I was not living my best life with the Windows Mixed Reality headset, is in Overload VR, as I would have with Project Cars, often the seat height doesn't come in like just right. And when the VR puts you basically in a pilot or a driver's body, it's very noticeable. In Overload VR, it sets in, and my head is right up against the overhead of the spacecraft. But in Steam VR in Oculus, you just hit one of the menu buttons, I guess on the left controller, the little Steam overlay comes up. You hit settings on the right-hand side. It has right there reset seat height button, and you just hit that, and it immediately pops me right back into where I'm supposed to be. And I'm like, that's boss. Like in comparison to the Windows thing, where it's like you got to go into the Windows mixed reality thing and like pop out into that goofy virtual world that they have, and like, it's a almost religiously liberating experience to be on the Rift S now.
I think you're going to find there's actually an easier way to do it. If you hit the
Okay.
Oculus button on your right controller,
Mm-hmm.
that should bring up reset or close.
So there's two things you can go into. What I found, at least in Overload for PC, is if you go into the Oculus thing, that doesn't fix the problem.
Oh, it doesn't. Okay.
But yes, if I hit the menu button on the right stick, that pulls me into the Oculus app UI, and yes, I can go in there and finagle with resetting the seat. What that seems to do, and maybe there's options, but what that seems to do is that changes my directional alignment and resets that so I'm center screen.
Okay.
But it doesn't reset the seat height. So
Oh,
at
really?
least for that game, what I found the easiest thing to do is to go into the Steam overlay, because like I said, it just has a reset seat height button. And 90% of the time for me,
That's
my
seat
problems
height.
with alignment are the seat height.
Yep.
Every
Yeah.
once in a while, if you go into that Steam VR lobby thing, right, the tree house out in the woods or whatever, where they have like the big block UI of all your games, sometimes I pop into that thing and I'm like, I'm looking straight ahead, but it's got me looking over at that big screen TV.
Yep.
So all my games are off to my left.
Yep.
But Yeah, but so it's probably going to be a little bit situational per game. I have only played Overload in its VR mode right now with my Rift S testing, so it may differ per game.
Yeah, if you have Elite Dangerous, I recommend just walking around your ship.
Okay.
Of course, you can stand up and go outside of the glass and whatnot. But that's one where I used to love when I now play on a tri-screen setup, but I used to love playing Elite in VR because you know if like sometimes I'll lean back in my game chair and my head will be like inside the guy's body or inside the actually
Right,
the pilot
right,
chair, right inside the
right,
pilot's chair, and so I could just hit the right Oculus button, and it gives you quit or reset, and that would always fix it for me. Same
right.
thing with Star Trek Bridge Crew. So it was
Okay,
just like it was like a one button. You have two choices. It was like
right,
boom, boom. No trying to find the F12 key or any of that.
right,
I wanted to bring up something that I want to because I'm a little curious, and if it doesn't work like this on the Rift S, it'll be a little disappointing. In Windows Mixed Reality, Windows Mixed Reality works. It has some good things about it, and it has some, nobody can get everything Gen 1, right? Rev
right,
1.
right,
Um, but I did like it that sometimes it would give you the option, do you want to draw a play space or do you want to play seated, right?
right, right,
But that wasn't like something that came up all the time. Like, it would come up if it didn't recognize, like if you didn't get the headset on, like if you put the headset on and you didn't look around right away,
right,
like the grandkids would put the headset on and then they weren't paying attention and it says look around and they
right.
wouldn't do that and then it would come up and it would want them to retrace the whole thing and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
So one thing that the Quest does, which is really cool, is if it doesn't recognize the room you're in, it brings up the Guardian Wizard.
Okay.
And it says, do you want to set up the Guardian, or you just want to do a seated experience? And so a lot of times I'm just doing seated experience because I'm in a recliner in the camper, or I'm in a recliner in downstairs in the living room, and I don't want to. We got a coffee table. It's like I'll do, and I like this. The seated works great. It just gives you a bubble automatically.
Right, right.
So when I put it on, if it doesn't recognize where I am, it says, "Do you want a seated experience, or you want to draw your Guardian?" I just choose seated, and it's the bomb. It's like
Right.
now definitely you got to draw something out. Something like with Vader Immortal, there's some lightsaber duels in there. You probably can imagine,
Yep.
and they need a lot of space. I was
Right.
like, I was hitting my little 8x6 thing. I kept bringing up the Guardian, and it was like, but so you're saying the Rift S doesn't give you that option? Just say seated, and they give you a bubble around you.
So you set your so what it does when you initially configure it as far as seat height or seated or whatever experience, part of the configuration utility is it has you basically like battle site zero the thing, right? But then one of the steps it does is it then once you're centered up, it says reach down and touch the floor. And it
Yeah.
gives you this, and you have this grid it's basically a horizontal plane representation of the Guardian grid, and you'll see it lower.
Yep.
And when you touch the floor, you'll then see it synchronize with your height. And then I think what it tells you is if you ever need to do that again, then you could just go back into that utility and do it again. And I think that's how you would differ between seated and standing. What I found is all of that stuff within the Oculus UI is incredibly simple to get to
Oh yeah.
in comparison to Windows
Steam
Mixed
or Windows.
Reality. Because Windows Mixed Reality, of course, I'm starting to draw, an analogy between that WMR app and the Oculus app, right? The difference with that WMR app is when you bring that up and then you need to do anything from a configuration standpoint, you go over that left side menu and it pops you out of that app and into settings. And maybe it's a Windows Mixed Reality part of settings, but it brings up a Windows 10. I forget what Microsoft calls the new design aesthetic for like all the Windows that's different from like the old 98 and XP oriented like control panel. Whatever that new thing is, it pops you into one of those, and so you're in a different thing, and then you have to monkey with that and then close it and then go back to the Windows Mixed Reality. So it's just very jarring in comparison to Rift, which keeps you all within its container. All the stuff is easy to get to. When you hit settings, you're still in the Oculus app. And the other thing is, when you initiate a new setting, you can immediately see like the difference. Whereas in the Windows app, like you'll see in this Windows setting that supposedly your setting took, but you often don't really know whether or not it fixed anything until you get all the way back underneath the visor. So yeah, it's just a different experience. It's so weird, right? Because WMR is Windows, but it feels like well, it's a Microsoft thing, and I'm a Microsoft fan. I love Microsoft products, but it is clearly a thing that was implemented by a team that was not part of the Windows team that implemented something that was never meant for Windows 10, and it feels jarring and non-native and non-organic when you're in it. The strange thing to me is when you're in Rift S, I guess because you're within that Rift S, what is probably not too far off from a virtualized container. Everything feels native and organic, and you never get bounced out to like the Windows thing. Even one of the settings for audio says use the Oculus audio pathways or use the Windows pathways, and it doesn't give you 59 options. Like, it doesn't bring up, like, on any PC I have like 8 different audio outputs, right? It doesn't bring all that up. It just says we're not going to bounce you out to Windows, we're going to keep you in here. You can choose us or you can choose Windows, and if you choose Windows, then you go down to your lower right hand corner and hit the little speaker button and monkey with which output you want it on. But that it, so that makes you do 2 hops to get to that, but it makes it feel contained and native and natural, and it doesn't have that jarring feel to it that WMR often does.
I want to throw out a couple more tips from that, how to fix Rift S issues, and they're very common. Some of the tips we use with Windows Mixed Reality, and quite honestly with the original Rift. And first thing is you got to make sure you have a USB 3 port that's fully powered. And some motherboards and some expansion cards, they they don't give full power to every port. So if you put 2 devices in the same port, they don't. And a lot of times they'll share 2 to 4 USB 3 ports to one controller, and that's not good. You just want to make sure the USB 3 cables plugged into a port that's not being shared. Usually you'll see them together if they're on your motherboard. They'll be
Right.
together. So if you have 2 close together, those are probably sharing a chip.
And I
So
would add
put
to
one
that,
in and don't put anything else in the other one.
right? The strange thing is don't shortchange yourself in that troubleshooting pathway by assumptions, meaning you would think that the back panel USB 3.0 ports would be the ones that would be getting the most juice. But from VR headsets and monkey with capture cards, because it happens with capture cards too, very often I can not get what I need out of those back panel ports, and I'll put the thing in a stinking front panel USB 3.0 port and it will work better. So when they say try every USB 3.0 port, literally try every single one, including your front panel ports.
Yeah, and on top of that, always put the USB in first because, and this happens with Windows Mixed Reality. Sometimes the computer will see it as a monitor. So put your USB port in first, then plug in your monitor port. And like you said, if it's not working on one of the display ports, try the other ones. Because it's really weird. I had this situation the other day. I plugged my Rift in, so I have 4 ports, 2 display port, 2 HDMI. Plug the Rift into one of my HDMI's, and so I have 3 screens running plus the Rift, and 2 of the screens started blinking. So I mixed everything around so I got to the point where all 3 screens were live and the Rift was working fine. But just the weirdest thing. So you just gotta do that. The There's some the people that make these video cards can take some liberties, on what each port can do, and it's just funny. You think you can put them in any order, no matter what you want, but you can't. So a good article. It'll be in the show notes. I wanted to throw out there too. The Odyssey Plus, which has better resolution than the Rift S, same resolution as the Vive Pro, same resolution as the Index. Now, I'm not saying the screen it looks as good because I don't know, I don't have it, but it is on sale for $300. I will put the link. I almost bought it. I decided not to because I already got 2 Windows Mixed Reality headsets, and it's a small upgrade from that. Um, but not a huge. So it does have integrated headphones though. That's which the Lenovo and the Acer does not, which is nice. But the Odyssey Plus not the regular Odyssey. Odyssey Plus on sale for $300. So if you want to try probably the best first gen Windows Mixed Reality, that's the way to go. I'd probably just go spend an extra $100 and get a Rift S, but that's me. If let's say you don't have DisplayPort, you need to run on you need the extra 10 hertz. You have to run at 90 hertz. You want the integrated headphones, and you want to save the $100, and you want to use HDMI. Then the Odyssey Plus is definitely an option. It's a good Gen 1 headset. Um, I also want to throw out that Vive port. We were talking about this, and I saw it. It's official next week. Vive port will be supporting not just Vive, not just Rift, but also Windows Mixed Reality. So hopefully this will help everybody because Windows Mixed Reality is over 10% of the market last time I checked. They're good, inexpensive headsets. They really are. And for starters, $200, how can you go wrong? And it's just nice if Vive is supporting them. That means more games will support them, and much better with the controls and whatnot. Um, and what else do we have about? Let's see if we can cover. I guess the last thing I want to cover on the Quest, since we're focusing on these headsets, is there was actually two things. So on the Quest, somebody was asking how good is the Guardian with the Quest because it's untethered, right? And so I found this hilarious little video. I'll put a link in the show notes. But basically, this guy he mapped out his room, and then he mapped out a pathway to his beer fridge. It was hilarious. It's like going around in a snake, and of course, he finally he exits the Guardian, so you can see what he's looking at. He's looking at a fridge and grabbing a drink. So I thought that was great. Now, converse to that, so many people have been saying the tracking of Windows Mixed Reality is horrible. And I remember when I got my Lenovo back from warranty replacement, because it just died, the screens died. I said what am I gonna try this out on? So I figured I'd fire up Skyrim VR, and I played a couple hours of Skyrim VR. I had no problems at all with the tracking. And some people have said they played a lot of Beat Saber with it and they haven't had problems. So Mr. TV, Mr. VR. I get the link in the show notes, but he puts the Windows Mixed Reality tracking through the gauntlet, and it is pretty good. It's. I know people think it stinks, but a lot of people say it stinks. It's not that bad. But in case you can see his video, he really puts it through the gauntlet. He tries several different games, and it's good even with two cameras. I wish they'd come out with an update with four cameras. But in any case, so that's what I want to cover. Plus, if you have a 3D printer, I'll put a Quest lens cover that is at Things First. I got to get my son to print that up for me because if you have a mobile headset, you're worried about the sunlight getting in there. You don't want the sunlight getting into your VR headset. So with that kind of covers all of the headsets. June 7th, I do want to say that PS4 Days of Play starts. There's going to be like $50 off VR bundles, so keep an eye out on that. And let's see what else. I think with that, I want to throw it over to you for your news stories. So let's hit yours. So those are all of mine.
Yeah, sure. I will try and jump through them very quickly. Actually, I have 3 alibis on the Rift S, though, if I could rattle those off really quick.
Oh, yeah.
One, so 2 of the things that I missed when I talked about my initial hardware impressions last week. One, there was a push button on the bottom of the visor that I didn't know what it was for because I didn't own a Rift before. That is actually like it allows you to telescope in and out
all right.
the visor, so that's how you get visor fit. So you have the screw down thing adjustment in the back, and then you hit the push button and you can telescope that in and out. As much as it sounds like I've been yep. As much as it sounds like I've been bashing Windows Mixed Reality in my Acer AH101 headset, one of the things I will say, and that it's really like I can't stand, that telescoping does not work anywhere near as well as the Acer AH101's ability to do the visor flip.
Okay, yep.
I will say I've been living in a better software world recently, but man, I miss the ability to just flip that visor up, look at my watch, look at my phone, reach and touch something on the keyboard, and quickly flip it back down. I've been living in a life of telescoping that thing out like by an inch, squeezing my left eye shut, like trying to look at things down out of my right eye. It is unpleasant. Because when I wear glasses underneath it, if I were wearing contacts, it would probably be easier. But when I wear glasses underneath it, to get the thing off, you've got to telescope it all the way out with both hands, pull the thing away from your face, or else unscrew the screw down on the back and pull the thing up. It just doesn't. With the Acer, it's very easy to be in this. If you're a motorcyclist, right, you're familiar with like walking around with your visor up. That's what it's like in the Acer. But in the Vive, it's almost like you got to get almost completely out of the thing to have visibility.
I had two problems with the Acer though. First one is when I ordered a referrebished one, it was like $130.
Okay.
When you flipped it up, it came back down. It's like that piece
Oh
broke.
yeah.
The
Okay.
second
Okay.
thing was I couldn't seem to get it to rest on my face. Like it wouldn't, like both of these. Like I
Yeah.
had to jack up the back to
Right.
get the front to sit down on my face. So, to me, it sounded like a great thing to have the flip
Right.
up, but in practice, and then the cables on all of the mixed reality headsets, the cables. Well, I don't know about the Odyssey, but the cables kink up
Yeah.
coming through this little slide right here. It's
Yeah.
you can see I got a Velcro on there, but they
Right.
kink
Right.
up. So when you go up and down, they get stuck there, and they put this extra pull.
Yep.
To me, I mean, as much as I love these headsets, there's definitely some things that can improve on the design. I didn't mean to go on a tangent there, but I just wanted to say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. When I'm in the Acer headset, I'm doing this business like quite often, right? Constantly dorking with the cable to try and get it to lay well. Conversely, the Oculus Rift cable, basically I drape it over my left shoulder and I never have to touch the thing while I'm playing it.
Yeah.
The second thing I wanted to mention that I missed is I think I completely missed. I talked about that I assumed because I hadn't unrolled the cable yet. It was still coiled up when I talked about it last week, and so I assumed that it had a 3.5 millimeter audio line running in it alongside like the Acer does. It's actually in the side, I think on the left hand side of the visor. Which works out okay. Actually, quite honestly, I think I prefer the Acer's implementation where it's just part of the cable, because in the current setup, my audio mixer is on my right hand side and the audio cable's on the left hand side, so it winds up draping across my body.
There's only one. The Quest has
Yeah,
two.
yeah. I'm pretty sure mine only has one. And then the third thing I just want to mention, because I know sometimes people may walk away with the wrong. I spent a lot of time talking about the Rift S tonight and comparing the Oculus software and UI with the Windows Mixed Reality software and UI. I realized for Rift owners who are upgrading, you don't care about the software probably. Everybody wanted to hear about the hardware experience. I focus on that just because that software experience has been the telltale negative of my WMR experience. The WMR hardware has been fine. Dealing with that WMR software layer has been problematic, and so that it's the perspective of somebody coming from WMR and going to Oculus. If you've already lived in the Oculus software world, obviously that's not an issue for you. From a hardware perspective, my feeling with the Rift S is, very good optics in the eyes. Very, it's not over the top resolution in comparison to some other headsets that are out there, but it is very snappy in image response, and very bright. It is incredible. The colors are very vibrant within the visor was the thing that I predominantly noticed, and good volume on the audio output. So
Yeah.
I want to make sure.
I just
Yeah, go
want to
ahead.
throw
Sorry.
out there. I think I don't have a Vive, but between Steam, Oculus, and Windows Mixed Reality, the Oculus software is just the bomb.
Okay.
Easy to use, easy to navigate. Um, I was kind of excited when you get the Rift S. I'm like, all right, now you can experience,
Right.
and and,
Right.
and that's pretty much. I mean, and the controllers. I just love the controllers.
Yeah.
Over the Windows Mixed Reality ones work, but they just to me look weird. So
Right. And I haven't
yeah, I
spent a
mean,
lot of time
that's
with the
my go-to
controllers.
headset. Yeah.
Yeah. And I haven't spent a lot of time with the controllers. I'll report back on that when I get some more time. I've been predominantly playing a game where I have the headset on, but I'm using, a third party, controller setup. So,
Yep.
quickly on the news stories, source from VR Scout, Modder adds custom songs to Beat Saber on Oculus Quest. So forget this guy's name. Brian Tate. Um, Part leader of the modding group Beast Saber, has been working on expanding the tracks that you have available for the Beat Saber version that's available on the Quest with some additional custom tracks. Predominantly has it working. The implementation is in beta. He and his team will continue to work on it. But for Quest owners, it presents to you the possibility of having more songs available than just the ones that are available in what looks like about the 4 different audio packs that are available for Beat Saber on Quest. The almost more interesting part of this article for me were the questions that I asked you, which was the mention of this Riftcat and ALVR, which presents the potential to allow you to stream PC VR titles to your Quest, which I personally think would be awesome if it works well. And then the second news article that I sourced to talk about, I sourced from road2vr.com, and I forget what you mentioned about the Sony PlayStation headset Days of Play, going on the 7th through the 17th. Interesting concurrent tidbit to go along with that is that head of research and development for Sony Interactive Entertainment, Dominic Mallinson, recently quoted in an interview this week saying PSVR 2 unlikely to launch at the same time as PlayStation 5. So if you've been following the PlayStation 5 announcements, one of the specific things that Mark Cerny mentioned was that the new PlayStation 5 would be backwards compatible, if you even want to call it that, with the current PSVR headset. Obviously, if you're going to deliver more powerful hardware, hopefully there would then be a technology step up in their PSVR kit. Head of R&D, who I think earlier was quoted as saying that it might arrive day and date with the launch of the PS5. I believe he is now walking that back and saying, one, for sticker shock reasons, that just wouldn't make sense, right? The thing about consoles is, and the reason why people go towards them instead of going towards a gaming PC, is that it is supposed to be a value proposition, being roughly kind of sort of maybe about half the price of a entry level to medium gaming PC. And so he's saying that the company strategy is they don't want to sticker shock everyone by saying, hey, here's the PlayStation 5, it's $400, $500. But if you also want to go PSVR, here's the new PSVR 2, which anytime a company launches a new product, you know that new product is going to become their priority more so than the support for the old one. And so people would then feel compelled to buy PSVR 2, which would put another $350 to $500 price tag on it. One of the things that was interesting in this article is they talked through the history of the pricing of PSVR, and it reminded me about my own initial reactions to it. Like when PSVR was as expensive as a Vive, I was like, no way in the world am I paying for that, and particularly when I was, in the waiting wings for a PS Pro. Current pricing on the kit, and of course there was all the chicanery as well with it's the visor and then the old motion controllers and then the old camera and now the new camera. It started up as high as $500 for that whole kit. It is now down at $350, which I think is appropriate. From my perspective, when they do get around to launching PSVR 2, you cannot come in at the same price as the Rift S, because if you're a multi-platform gamer and you do that, I'm going to be like, I'm not, why would I buy PSVR 2? I'll just go buy a Rift S and connect it to my gaming PC. Now, for your customers that don't have a gaming PC, but I was like, your customer who's going to be in the ballpark for a PSVR, I feel like probably has a powerful enough PC to be a gaming PC, but I just feel like they've got to stick to that $350 price point. So I thought that was interesting as we see the drama of the PlayStation 5 impending announcements and release sometime within the next 2 years, to be an interesting tidbit.
When I've seen, and I find this very interesting because I think most people are playing VR. There was a standalone for a while, and then there was we have the Rift, we had the Vive, then we had standalones, right, with the Gear or Google Cardboard, and then the Gear VR and the Oculus Go. So those two, are very distinct groups, and I think we both understand, what kind of games were on both platforms, what kind of experiences they were. But one of the things that I found has been really jarring, well, two things really. Number one, Some of the best VR games made in the last 3 years have been PSVR exclusives. Okay. And I'm just going by what all these great people at at Road to VR and Upload VR and Scout VR, VR Scout, and all these people say. I mean, they just get some of the highest reviews. They have some. It's almost like console exclusives. They have these VR exclusives that are some of the best games out there in their PSVR only. But here's the second thing I found was a lot of VR companies that struggled on the PC get millions of sales on the PSVR, and it's amazing
But
because I think they have what they have over two million
I think
PSVRs.
they have four. I think their install base is 4 million, like
Yeah,
4.2 million.
so they got a lot of them out there, and I think it's a hungry audience because I don't think there's nearly as much many quality titles on the PSVR. They don't have the selection that we have on a PC. I mean, you just look at VR titles on Steam, and it's there's just everybody and their brothers making something. Because the barrier to entry just to throw up a Steam game is much lower than to create a PS4 game. That
Well, and that's
said, some of the very popular PC games, PC VR games, when they go to PlayStation, they just have unbelievable success.
what I wanted to ask you. Do you think so? So one of the things we talked about last night on the Enough to Keep Going podcast is Days Gone, number 2 on the NPD charts, number 2, and I think number 4 on the weekly NPD charts in the month of May, and then rounded out the month at number 2. One of the things I speculate about is that could be very well driven by a platform that has a 100 million plus user install base with an exclusive title when there's nothing else for those people to play. So I guess one of my questions is do you think that statistic is potentially skewed because it's a group of people who have a comparatively small population of VR titles that they have access to? So does that potentially cause what I used to call the Xbox Halo effect in comparison to PC, where, like you said, there's tons of VR titles all over the place, plus you have tons of stuff in early access. And part of the problem on the PC is that you're picking through, sometimes your best bet is a thing that's in early access, and that causes you to look at that with a different eye as far as when and where you jump for it at what price. Whereas on PSVR, what I mean by the Xbox Halo effect is in Generation 7, what I used to say about exclusives is, because Sony fanboys would jump up and down and say, we have more, when it was PlayStation 3. And I was like, you have more, but each of your individual exclusive titles does not sell as many units because your purchase base gets spread. Only so many people buy Infamous, only so many people buy Uncharted. But when you look at Halo on Xbox, when a Halo game comes out, it's a binary statement that I say for deliberately exaggeration, but kind of, when Halo comes out on Xbox, everybody on Xbox buys Halo. When Gears comes out on Xbox, everybody on Xbox buys Gears. So I'm just wondering, is it possible that perception of Sony PSVR players is because when a good VR game comes out on Sony, lots of people in that 4.2 million user install base go and buy that game?
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of it. And I think the other part is you have these people who have the PSVR, and that's what they want to play. They're passionate. Maybe not all 4 million of them, but a huge percent of them are passionate about it. They want to play it, and they there's probably 30 or 40 PS4 games that come out a month. There's probably one or two or three PSVR games, quality games, right? And so I think if you have a game that's highly rated on PC and you bring it to PSVR, it's a gold mine for you. And I think
Right.
it's because it's a closed market. I mean, on the PC we're asking, do I buy it from Viveport, Steam, or Oculus? On the
Right.
PSVR, you're buying it from PlayStation. It's a very closed market. There's less available titles. They're higher quality, and you have that. I believe it's a younger generation who's in that monthly march of a new game. I play every day after school. I finish it after a couple weeks. I'm ready for another one.
Right. Well, it's that, and I hate you more and more. I wind up talking about socioeconomic demographics on different platforms. So I feel like that's becoming a larger force in these different markets. you have people who went for a value proposition console at $400 or $500 versus going for a more expensive gaming PC. They have now made an investment of $350 to $500. They've got to get ROI
Oh
on
yeah.
that. So when a hot VR title comes, it's going to get bought. Whereas some of this, when I get into some of this sounds sanctimonious, gray. The Rift S, the Vive, right? These are not the only $400 peripherals we have for our PCs. That's a GPU for us, right? Yeah. So, so I mean, I just wonder how much that plays differently in the perception of reception of different titles as they land on different platforms.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think most PC gamers, you know, the question becomes, I know I could buy it all, but I will never get to use it all. So what a waste of money that would be. I have like all three Xbox Ones, and I've told you before I've regretted buying the Xbox One X because, I just it produced 4K visuals that to me kind of look like 1080p visuals. But I'm sure scientifically Digital Foundry would tell you it's better, but when you're
Right.
flying at 300 miles an hour down a racetrack, all I see is yeah. Do you really notice? So,
right.
But yeah, I think you hit it on the head. Hey, I wanted to talk about what else did we have here? Um, we played a couple of different VR games tonight, and those will get uploaded tomorrow, and or probably around the same time you're seeing this. So I won't spend too much time on that. You can see that we played Trickster, and I don't know if I have anything from VR Dungeon Night. We really didn't know what we were doing, so. But in any case, I'm just looking through here to see did we miss anything in our list? Did you have anything else in the show notes that you wanted to cover? Because I think I covered everything I had.
Yeah, nothing super major. My only other comment is, despite what I may have said, that is not to take anything away from the developers of those games that are Sony PSVR. That's just to say that maybe the two different populations of user groups talk about and kind of cheerlead for those games differently. That's not by any means to say that you you put a really strong football team in a Division III school, and no wonder you're winning the conference, right? So, but yeah, I mean, all those games are definitely good and solid on Sony's platform as well as PC.
Yeah, and I don't want to diminish any adults out there who prefer PSVR. For a long time, I played on the Xbox because it was the easiest way to play with friends who were not technical. I'm a geek. I got multiple computers lying around, some open, some closed. But if you want to just get together and play some Rainbow Six Vegas or some Battlefield, the easiest place to do that with the least amount of hassle is on a console. And I'm sure we talk about the issues we've been having with VR. Of course, the Quest is more like a console, so there weren't any issues. But the issues I had with the Rift, the issues you had your Rift S, the issues we had with our mixed reality headsets, Windows mixed reality headsets. I mean, that's something you're not going to find on the PSVR. That's an easy plug and play. It's all one company type of, and I totally understand anybody out there who appreciates that and prefers that. And that's one of the reasons I get the Quest because and it's really kind of the same experience. It's like a console if you think about
Agreed.
it.
And it is as far as I know and understand, it single homogeneous SKU that is the best selling, right? So larger install base of VR across the board on PC, but that's made up of multiple different SKUs from different manufacturers. So as far as like one SKU that sold that many, as far as I know, Sony PSVR is it. And I actually have that device on my purchase list for an eventual hunt down as well. So yeah, not to say anything, not to slander PSVR users or players or the devs who put those games over there. They're all great.
Yeah, it's all those devs who do crossplay with Sony, PSVR, and Windows, or Steam VR games. Thank you. I know Star Trek Bridge Crew supports that, and Rec Room supports that, and we appreciate that because all us VR people we want to hang out together and play together. But with that, I think we're done. Where can people find you this week at Rounding Off Infinity and enough to keep going? Why don't you tell us what you guys got going on?
I've essentially popped off of all social media, so pretty much the only place you will find me is on my YouTube channel, Rounding Off Infinity. And yes, also on episodes of Enough to Keep Going, which is on the E2KG Network channel on YouTube as well.
Okay, so you'll see those under the host links for Agaskles or Sir Aga, as we're doing the whole VR night thing. And as far as me, you'll find me here on the Gamers Show. We just played VR tonight, so those videos go up tomorrow. And then we should be playing Elite Dangerous live on Sunday night, like we always do. I know Commander Macebite is flying off in real life to go to a week-long training session at for automation. So that's where you'll find me. And I just want to thank you again for co-hosting the show with me, and thank all you for watching. Please, if you have any comments, leave them for us. We didn't have a lot of comments last time, nothing really worth reading on the show. But if you want your voice heard, please leave a comment on the video, and we'll try to read it on air. But with that, any final words there, Sir Aga?
No, nope, I have nothing additional.
All right, folks. Until next time, peace.